implication. Okay, so now I'm thinking about, so in one of my songs I talk about this crazy Easter that I had where I was in a hot tub for 6 hours with a Jewish professor and a guy named Brother Craig, and we were talking and discussing gender at an extensive, and this guy was a professor at fucking Pepperdine in Judaism. So we've got me speaking for women in this conversation for 6 hours. We've got this old Jewish man who's a professor in Judaism. And then we've got Brother Craig who's speaking for black men community. And that's how we spent Easter. We talked about Jesus and Mary Magdalene and the Jewish perspective of it too, but also the black community perspective of it. But then also the feminine voice of it, and we did this for 6 hours. It was the most beautiful Easter I've ever had, probably. And yeah, there's some specifics that I remember from this conversation, but really, honestly, what I remember from the whole 6 hours of this is the feeling. It was so beautiful. It felt like unity. I don't know. It just felt like we were all really, really listening and understanding each other. Yeah, it really did. And we were all talking, we somehow all just had extensive knowledge on random things. So we were all teaching each other. It felt like we were all really genuinely listening, and the conversation kept evolving as we kept teaching each other. It was, what an Easter. I think this was 2022. Yeah, this was in Calabasas. This was in Avalon. What a freaking Easter. What I am thinking about, Mom, is I was just watching this crow walk, and just the way that it was walking, it was kind of sexy. I was like, this crow is kind of sexy. Why aren't you saying anything about this?
What crow?
I was watching a crow walk.
Where?
Just outside, and I realized that crows are kind of sexy when they walk, and that's where the idea of a strut came from. Okay, so here's something. So I was just cackling to myself in the car because I was thinking about this memory of a friend. And I was thinking about this memory of him literally walking up to me right as this Tarzan song was playing in the background of the you'll be in my heart, that song. He's coming up to me and he says nothing. He's on the phone. He just takes a drag of my cigarette, okay? And he goes and he walks away. And I'm just thinking of this memory. And on the radio, all of a sudden, it says his name just really loud. And so I just started cackling, laughing, because I was thinking about this memory. And I was like, why am I thinking about this? I don't want to be thinking about this. And then it says, the radio said his name really loud. So this is a phenomenon I've been documenting called comparative clavicularisms. Because it also, clavicular ties in. Alright, so the word clavicular, we need to think about what that means. Before I start talking about my new branch of study called Comparative Clavicularisms. It's this part of the collarbone. Clavicula is what it comes from, which means little key, which also means hinge. It's the point at which things hinge, or the connective piece, the intersection of it all, the crossing point, if you will. And so when something weirdly intersects and connects, but it's something inside of you, and then also through media, that is called a comparative clavicularism, which is a comparative kind of intersection that's a little bit impossible or weird, the math doesn't add up. Something I've been looking at the past month. It also has to do with Cleadonism. It's Cleadonism, but on steroids, which is funny. Cause literally. So Cleadonism is what? I've posted about this, I've talked about this, it's something I practice. It's the practice of divination through random things. It's essentially, these kind of poetry words, and then put together. Oh my god, and what is this? Learning never exhausts the mind, Leonardo da Vinci. Build, bound, follow. But yeah, so it's found words being turned into some sort of divinatory message, finding the the metadata or the subcontext for why it is you're reading those words in the moment you're reading them, what kind of questions you have on your mind, what it is you're exploring mentally, what kind of terrain, and how like the words that you hear outside of yourself and the images you see outside of yourself can kind of answer that and like feed into that, like kind of like a feedback loop. So it's like when Clintonism intersects with like media outside of yourself, it becomes like a clavicularism. Okay, stay with me. And what I'm doing here is I'm taking very like ancient or like even like biological concepts and I'm applying them to modern day media and social engineering. And yeah, so comparative clavicularisms, that is a thing. It has to do with the ex-boyfriend algebra, the slope-intercept form of a line. The X, where things meet, that's like the comparative clavicular. So it's like when Clintonism intersects with like media outside of yourself, it becomes like a clavicularism. Okay, stay with me. And what I'm doing here is I'm taking very like ancient or like even like biological concepts and I'm applying them to modern day media and social engineering. And yeah, so comparative clavicularisms, that is a thing. It has to do with the ex-boyfriend algebra, the slope-intercept form of a line. The X, where things meet, that's like the comparative clavicularisms, okay? Yeah. That's what I have to say about that. I'm thinking about these things. So it's like when Clintonism and the M is kind of like the accelerant or the multiplier, you know, in this whole y equals mx plus b. But in ex-boyfriend algebra, we also go into the quadratic equation, which if you went to the same middle school as me, you'll know there once was a negative b who had a plus or minus chance of going to a radical party. And inside of that party, there were two b's square dancing. And the whole thing was over at 2 a.m. Oh, there were two b's square dancing. There were b's square dancing, and there were also four awesome chicks. And the whole thing was over at 2 a.m. And that's essentially a fun little poem to remember the quadratic formula. Okay, but let's stick to the. We'll get to the b's and the negative b. And the m is kind of like the and I'm divulging this as I stand on the front lines of discovering this, and I bring you comparative clavicularism, Clintonism, and ex-boyfriend algebra. But what else do I bring you? Oh, okay, so the M is maxing, essentially. It's like the maxing or the minning. So you can max, you can min. And then the B is the baseline. It's kind of like your baseline, which I kind of think of as like your home base, which if you look at it in like, as like if you look at like polyamorous texts and you look at the concept of a home base and you use that as a metaphor, then you kind of understand what I mean by baseline. But this has nothing to do with polyamory or anything else in that. But like, yeah, so switching your baseline. And then the Y is what's over yonder, which yonder is a much more complicated level tiered out project thing that I've been doing probably ever since New Year's Day. But even longer than that. Like even like back, like it, honestly, we can find roots of this back in 2014. But it's essentially my way to like restructure the internet so that it feels like an amusement park. So there's that. Do I ever expect to actually finish things? No. Sometimes I like claim impossible things. Like some days I'm like, okay, well what happens if I try to cure cancer today? Like right now. Like if I just give myself 20 minutes, like what can I come up with? And I think it's just kind of funny. It's less about completing the impossible thing or doing the impossible thing. It's more about what happens in the process of trying and what we learn in the process of attempting it that I find to be very valuable data.